Good morning, Dr. Fiuk and Dr. Carpes. In the previous presentation, I showed you indicators for benefits measurement. Now I'm gonna show you indicators for costs. Just to remember the way I see in a pictorial way, I always put the decision maker in a situation where he has to choose an integration mechanism, and according to the ICA theory, he does that. In order to do that, he weighs CR and he weighs NABs. So we have to measure CR and we have to measure NAB. NAB, which is the difference between benefits and costs, so we have to measure benefits and costs. Okay, so the mechanism costs, they can be all transaction costs associated to a mechanism. So we can talk about costs, decision costs before choosing the mechanisms, and autonomy costs after choosing, when the mechanism starts to run. Okay, so I always show you a table, but let's zoom it, and then we analyze the attributes I have chosen. The first attribute means the first attribute is a mechanism costs is the subtraction or a loss or a payment, if you want to say that, of something that has institutional value, something that the institution consider as valuable, and this value is passed to the mechanism, like transferred to the mechanism, like a payment to the mechanism. This is the first attribute. The second is cost is something that decreases the institution's individual capability to deliver service. So I'm not talking about the mechanism capability, but when an institution gives something to the mechanisms, and if you think just about the institution after giving something to the mechanism, its individual capability decreases. Okay. Costs. Its existence is perceived, is certain, and I consider that as necessary, because if it's a cost is not certain, it's just a possibility. I'm not talking about the proper value. It's not about knowing the value, measuring perfectly the value, but it's about to know if this thing we call it cost, if it exists. If not, if just a possibility, is not a cost, is a risk of a cost. Okay, this cost can be shared or transferred from one institution to another, because sometimes a total cost of a mechanism can be split among institutions. It generates resistance, avoidance, because we assume the rational decision maker. It's an assumption. He always gonna try to maximize its gains. So all costs generate resistance, avoidance. Uh, it's usually quantifiable, but not always perfectly. It can be economic, political, social, and technical. As I told you, it can be a decision cost or an autonomy cost. Okay, so from those attributes, I have chosen the following generic indicators. A cost represents the reduction of something that has institutional value. Basically the same attribute with a little bit different words. It implies a reduction in the institution's individual capacity or capability to provide service. Okay, like it's basically the same thing I told you in the attributes. All other indicators, generic indicators, are basically the attributes with other words. And I just talk a little bit more about when it's a decision cost or when it's autonomy cost. So I describe them, and you can just understand that it's about a chronological point. If the cost is before choosing, so it's a decision cost. But if the cost is after putting the integration mechanism to function, so it's autonomy cost. Okay, and transitioning from generic to specific indicators. Okay, so for the first indicator, which means reduction of something that has institutional value, one indicator is if the collaboration makes difficult for the MOD to accomplish its constitutional mission. According to Article 142 of our Constitution, Federal Constitution, we have our primary mission, our constitutional mission related to sovereignty. So defend our country against any invasion, for example. And if the collaboration makes it difficult, so there is a cost. It's a cost. And if collaboration makes it difficult for the defense to achieve its vision, because armed forces are always trying to modernize their means, their equipment, their troops, techniques, etc. It's important because we assume that armed force needs to be, how can I say, better, always better than their enemies. And in order to collaborate, if I have to let some modernization go, or retard or delay, there is a cost. And we have our values, institutional values. If the collaboration is something that goes against it, it's a cost. And I could say it's a high cost. Number two, about decreasing institutional capabilities. If the costs, if something diverts defense officials from our mission, our primary mission, which is defense, sovereignty, etc. It decrease defense capability, and sometimes you just you don't use equipment, military equipment or supplies, but you need service time, time to think, time to decide, time to discuss, to meeting. So it's a cost, and it decreases our capability because we are doing something else than defense. And if the collaboration does not coincide with anything useful, then it's a cost. Sometimes coincides. Sometimes the task accorded is something that we have already had to do. So there is no cost. Third, economic loss. When reduces part of defense budget, we can actually measure it. It's easy. And if decrease some defense means, equipment, facilities, etc. Okay. Political loss, political and social losses are very hard to find indicators and measuring them. So what I thought, political loss, when it closes space for dialogue in Congress with deputies and with senators, we have some kind of costs, political costs. In terms of social loss, if it decreases public opinion of the military, it's a social loss, it's a social cost. And if it makes it difficult to protect and integrate indigenous people, this is very specific to the Amazon, I believe there is a social cost. When the collaboration decreases some expertise because you take personnel off the training, and depending on how long you take them off, they kind of forget what they have to do. So you have a technical cost. You have to train later. You have to spend more time and money and supplies in order to recover capabilities. Okay, number 7. It's about those are indicators to see, to characterize, to differentiate autonomy and decision costs. If it's time used to investigate possible costs, expected benefits, Then it's decision cost, and it can be measured because it's time, and we have units for measuring time. If it refers to financial expenditure, the salary of someone who led defense to research some possible cost of a mechanism, that's another cost, decision cost. About autonomy costs, we can use as indicators all enforcement expenses, time, personnel, everything, facilities used to oversight the mechanism, etc. If you lose authority over your personnel, if you lose some employee, he's not gonna work anymore for defense, but for the mechanism. This is loss of this is autonomy costs. And if you lose authority over troop employment, the troops, they are not going to be employed according your way of doing something, your planning, your, how can I say, under your orders. It's an autonomy cost. If you lose authority over equipment, like, okay, this helicopter, this truck, this ship, this airplane, if I lose authority when used, how use, why use, if I don't have more, I no longer have authority, this is an autonomy cost. And the same reason about facilities. Okay, so that's it. I put in the file attached all discussion according Gering's criteria, and I attached all discussion about reliability and validity. But the way I see, basically what is hard to measure, I believe I told you before, what is hardest is find specific indicators to measure political costs and social costs. That's the biggest challenge. Okay, that's it. Thank you very much. See you.